My father, in his presidential campaign, he did something that everybody thought was impossible, which was to unite white working class Americans and middle class Americans with the poor, with people of color, with American Indians, with Cesar Chavez, and with urban blacks. And when I was a kid, my father would take us whenever we traveled anywhere. He'd always take us to an Indian reservation nearby. When we went to Appalachia, he'd take us to a place where there was a lot of poverty. On weekends, he'd take us a drive through Southeast Washington, and he would say to us, "These are our people. These are Kennedy people. The wealthy people in this country, they don't need a politician or a lawyer or anything else. They don't need the Kennedys. They already have the system rigged." And he said, "These are your people." And, my father would come back. He came back one time from Mississippi, and we were all sitting at dinner, and he came back and he said to us, "Today I saw a family, I visited a family there were two families living in a house smaller than this dining room. And the children have only one meal a day." And he said, "When you get older, I want you to help those people." And so that was kind of a message that, that was part of, I think, all of our growing up.
There's an expectation of benevolence.
You're going to help somebody who's less fortunate. Like, my aunt, Eunice Shriver, founded Special Olympics. Her son, Anthony Shriver, who's very strong supporter of my campaign, is running my campaign in Florida, was the founder of Best Buddies, which helps people with intellectual disabilities to unite them with college kids. Another of his brothers runs UNICEF. Another of his brothers runs Save the Children. And, you go through my family, and most of them are doing things like that, where they're doing things to stand up for the most vulnerable, the alienated, dispossessed people in the society and bring them into the American experience. I try to forgive people. And Sirhan, for a couple of reasons, Sirhan was in jail for 60 years. I don't think anger or resentments are a good thing. I think that they're corrosive to your soul. And I think, having anger or resentment, carrying that around against another human being is like swallowing poison and hoping someone else will die. And you're letting other people live in your head rent-free, and you're giving them power over your life. So, the best way to escape from, that kind of corrosive force is to pray for people and forgive them. And so I don't carry resentments or anger toward him. But also, I don't believe that his bullets killed my dad.
Yeah.
And I think if my dad were around, my dad really, the arc of his whole career was toward justice. And, there's a little brown guy in jail who didn't get a proper trial for 60 years. And I think my father would at least, would not like that.
Oh, wow. So through everything that you've been through, all the trauma that you faced as a kid, experiencing all these horrible events, you still have a desire to serve the American people and to wake up every day, whether it's through environmentalism, whether it's through, politics. Do you ever get the feeling of just giving up?
No, I don't, because, what are we here for, right? I mean, it's not just to make a big pile for ourselves and whoever dies with the most stuff wins. There's got to be there's got to be a reason. I think anything that is worthwhile you have to struggle for. I mean, I look back, I read a lot of history, and everybody that I've admired throughout human history, whether it's, Alexander the Great to Magellan to, they've all been through a struggle where they were disavowed by everybody that they knew, and where they had to kind of walk through a valley of death where they were completely alone. And, that is one of the things that made their lives worthwhile. All the incoming flack that I get, I try to look at that as a gift and say, the harder this is, the more important it is. And if you look at it that way, you can change your attitude towards it. you don't ever feel oppressed by it. I think that the most paralyzing thing that people, that really disables a lot of people is a sense of victimization and self-pity. And that, when I got sober 40 years ago, but at one point I said, I heard myself complaining about something. And I thought, that's kind of a natural reaction for me, that if somebody asks me, how you doing, that I'll share some, bad thing that happened to me recently or something. So I said, I'm going to experiment with just not complaining about anything for Lent. And it was right at the beginning of Ash Wednesday. I went for 40 days and I just didn't complain. So if somebody asked me, how you doing, I always say, great. And then what I would do, because I don't want to lie, I'd say, well, why am I feeling great? I'm feeling great because I'm an American at a time in history when most of the people in this country live like gods compared to every other person in history. I live at a time when there's antibiotics. I'd be dead if it weren't for antibiotics. I can get orange juice whenever I want it. I can get, there's glass in front of me when I drive so the bugs don't come in my eyes. And I think of all these little things that, okay, I'm grateful for, and then I make that list, and I feel differently about life. I'm processing life differently, processing experience differently in a way that lifts my mood and makes me feel grateful. And gratitude ultimately is a choice, So at the end of 40 days, I just said, this is really working for me. And so since then, I've never complained about anything in my life, nothing. And I have my son Connor, when I was when he was, he was like 14 years old, and he said to me, hey, Dad, how come I've never heard you complain about anything? And I said to him, it's actually not a natal impulse for me. My atavistic impulse is to complain about a lot of stuff. And I told him the story that I just made a decision and that it really worked out for me. And after that, I never heard him complain in his whole life. And he's went through a lot of nightmare stuff. But everybody loves him because he just has a buoyant attitude and never complains about anything. So I think I recommend it. I think it's a really good way to live your life and to forgive people who wrong you. And I've had people do things where I could walk around with justified anger. If I have things that I could justify if I wanted to be, if I let myself be angry. You're giving other people control of your mind and, over your day.